My sister went through my phone at Thanksgiving dinner and announced my $10 million bank balance to the entire table. When my parents demanded I transfer half to her because she needed a fresh start, I smiled, agreed, and immediately initiated a protocol that would leave them with absolutely nothing. Before we begin today's story, we have an urgent announcement. Due to technical issues, this channel is shutting down. But don't worry, the stories continue. Please subscribe to our new channel, Daily Drip Stories. You can find the link in the video description, the pinned comment, and the collaboration tag on this video. Make sure to switch over now so you don't miss out. Thank you for your support. Now back to the story. The mashed potatoes were cold, but the heat radiating from my face could have warmed the entire dining room. It wasn't the wine, and it wasn't the fireplace crackling in the corner of my parents' cramped living room. It was the silence. That terrible, suffocating silence that falls right before a bomb goes off. I was sitting at the kids' table, a card table set up in the corner because my mother, Maria, insisted the main table was for the adults and guests of honor. At 34 years old, owning a company I had built from the ground up and recently sold for a sum that would make their heads spin, I was still relegated to the wobbly table with the mismatched chairs. Meanwhile, my 32-year-old sister, Natalia, sat at the head of the mahogany dining table, swirling her wine glass, looking every bit the queen of a kingdom she hadn't earned. "Aria, you're not eating," my father, Joseph, grunted, not looking up from his turkey. "Food not good enough for you." "It's fine, Dad," I said, keeping my voice level, "just not very hungry." "Probably ate before she came," Natalia chimed in, a smirk playing on her lips. "You know how she is, likes the fancy stuff. This is probably peasant food to her." I gripped my fork until my knuckles turned white. "I didn't say that, Natalia. I just have a headache." "Always a headache," Maria sighed, passing a bowl of stuffing to Natalia. "Unlike your sister here, who has been helping me cook since 6 this morning, Natalia is such a blessing." I stared at the congealing gravy on my plate. I had paid for the turkey. I had paid for the wine. I had paid for the new oven the turkey was cooked in. But Natalia, who had shown up at noon with a bag of laundry for Mom to do, was the blessing because she stood in the kitchen and gossiped while Mom worked. "Actually," Natalia said, her voice taking on a sharp, sugary edge that made my stomach turn. "Speaking of blessings, Aria, where's your phone?" I patted my pocket, empty. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in my chest. I had it a second ago. Why?" Natalia reached under the table and pulled out my device. It was unlocked. I must have left it open on the side table when I went to help with the dishes earlier. The one task they actually allowed me to do. But it wasn't just my phone she was holding. It was the screen, the bright, undeniable blue interface of my banking app. I was just looking for a calculator to split the tip for the pizza we ordered last night, which you still haven't paid me back for, by the way, Natalia lied smoothly, her eyes gleaming with a predatory light. But then I saw this. She turned the phone around. The numbers were small, but to everyone in that room, they might as well have been written in fire across the wall. $10,450,000. My father dropped his fork. It clattered against the china, the sound echoing like a gunshot. My mother stopped chewing, her mouth hanging slightly open. "Aria," Joseph asked, his voice trembling, is that real?" I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Give me my phone, Natalia, now." $10 million, Natalia whispered, savoring every syllable. She looked at me, not with pride, not with congratulations, but with a sheer, unadulterated fury that chilled me to the bone. "You have $10 million sitting in a checking account, and you let Mom and Dad struggle with the heating bill last month." "I paid the heating bill," I snapped, reaching for the phone. "I paid it in full, and the mortgage, and your car insurance, Natalia." "Pocket change," Natalia shrieked, slamming her hand on the table. "That was pocket change to you. You're sitting on a dragon's hoard while we're scraping by, while I am suffering." "Suffering," I laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "You live rent-free in their basement. You haven't held a job for longer than 3 months in a decade." "That's enough." Maria slammed her hand down, her face red. She looked from the phone to me, her eyes hardening. "Aria, sit down." "Mom, she stole my phone." "I said sit down." I slowly lowered myself back into the wobbly chair. The air in the room had shifted. It wasn't just awkwardness anymore. It was hostility. They weren't looking at me like a daughter or a sister. They were looking at me like a target. "We need to discuss this," Joseph said, wiping his mouth with a napkin. He looked at the phone, then at Natalia, and finally at me. His expression wasn't one of shock anymore, it was calculation. "We are a family, and families share burdens and blessings." "I am not sharing this," I said, my voice shaking. "I worked for 10 years. I built that software from nothing. I sold it. It's mine." "It's ours," Natalia corrected, leaning back in her chair, a triumphant smile spreading across her face. "And since I'm the one who needs it most, I think we all know what needs to happen." My mother nodded, reaching out to touch Natalia's hand comfortingly. Then she turned her gaze on me, cold and expectant. "Your sister has had a hard life, Aria. She has so much potential, but she's never had the capital to launch her dreams. You're fine, you're stable, you don't need all that." "We've decided," Joseph said, as if the verdict had been reached years ago. "You're going to transfer $5 million to your sister, tonight." I looked at them, the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. I saw the greed in their eyes, the entitlement, the absolute lack of shame. The betrayal was worse than the theft itself. It was the realization that I had never been a person to them, just a resource waiting to be mined. I excused myself to the bathroom, my legs feeling like lead. I needed to breathe, I needed to think. Locking the door behind me, I turned on the faucet to mask any sound of my hyperventilating. I stared at myself in the mirror. My face was pale, my eyes wide and terrified. I looked like a child again, the little girl who used to hide in her closet when Maria and Joseph screamed about money, praying that if I was just quiet enough, just good enough, they wouldn't turn their anger on me. I splashed cold water on my face, watching the droplets run down my skin like tears. $5 million. It wasn't just the money, it was the audacity. They truly believed they had a right to it. They didn't see the nights I slept under my desk because I couldn't afford an apartment and keep the servers running. They didn't see the years of missed birthdays, the ruined relationships, the stress-induced ulcers. They just saw the number. I sat on the edge of the bathtub, hugging my knees to my chest. The muffled sounds of their conversation drifted through the thin door. They weren't whispering. They were excited. "We can finally fix the roof," my father was saying, his voice booming, "and get that new truck." "I'm going to look at condos in the city tomorrow," Natalia's voice carried, high and giddy. "A penthouse. I deserve a view, Mom. After everything I've been through with that ex, I deserve a view." "Of course you do, sweetie," my mother cooed. "Aria will understand. She's always been the sensible one. She knows it's the right thing to do." I felt a physical pain in my chest, a sharp ache right behind my ribs. The sensible one, that was their code word for the doormat. The one who wouldn't complain. The one who would absorb the blow so the golden child could stay pristine. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I had managed to snatch it back before fleeing the table, though Natalia had fought me for it. I looked down. A text from my bank, unusual activity detected. Login attempt from new device. My blood ran cold. Natalia, she must have memorized my username when she was scrolling, or maybe she had tried to transfer funds while I was arguing with Dad. She didn't have my password or the two-factor authentication code, but the attempt alone showed how far she was willing to go. She wasn't asking anymore. She was taking. I looked around the bathroom. The peeling wallpaper, the dripping faucet I had offered to fix last Christmas but was told not to bother. This house was a shrine to their mediocrity, a temple to their refusal to try, and now they wanted to drag me down into it with them. I stood up, drying my hands on a towel that smelled like mildew. A strange calm began to settle over me. It was the calm of a soldier who realizes the diplomacy phase is over. They thought they had me cornered. They thought guilt and parental authority were chains I couldn't break. They thought I was still the scared little girl who just wanted them to love her. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. I didn't make $10 million by being a pushover. I made it by outsmarting people who thought they were smarter than me. To understand why my sister felt entitled to half my net worth, you have to understand the mythology of our family. Natalia was born 3 years after me. She was a colicky baby, a difficult toddler, and a rebellious teenager. But in my parents' eyes, she was a suppressed genius. When she failed math, it was because the teacher was intimidated by her creativity. When she got fired from her barista job for throwing a latte at a cuss. Tomer, it was because she refused to be disrespected. I, on the other hand, was just Aria. I was the one who got straight A's, not because I was smart, but because I studied too much. I was the one who got a scholarship, which they took as an insult because it implied they couldn't provide. For the last decade, I had been the silent safety net. When Natalia decided she was going to be a fashion designer, I paid for the sewing machines she never used. When she wanted to be a DJ, I bought the turntables that are currently gathering dust in the garage. When she got a DUI, I paid the lawyer. I did it because I wanted peace. I did it because every time I said no, Maria would cry about how I was abandoning the family, and Joseph would lecture me on loyalty. I had created a monster. I knew that. I had fed the beast of her entitlement until it was large enough to devour me whole. But recently, things had changed. Natalia had met someone, a life coach named Chase, though he wasn't here tonight. Since meeting him, her demands had shifted from impulsive to strategic. She wasn't just asking for cash for rent anymore, she was asking for seed capital. She was talking about generational wealth. I opened the bathroom door and walked back into the dining room. The atmosphere was festive, like they were already celebrating the lottery win. Natalia was pouring more wine, her face flushed with victory. "Finally," she said, raising her glass. "We were just talking about the transfer limit. You might have to do it in chunks, Aria. The banks can be sticky about large sums." She looked at me, her eyes sweeping over my simple sweater and jeans with disdain. Natalia was beautiful in a sharp, manufactured way. She spent hours on her makeup, days on her hair. She looked the part of a wealthy heiress, while I looked like the IT support staff. "And," Natalia continued, setting her glass down, "I think it's best if you put the money into a joint account. With Mom and Dad, just for oversight. You know you're not great with spending, Aria. Remember that time you bought that expensive ergonomic chair? Total waste." "I work sitting down for 12 hours a day, Natalia," I said quietly. "See," Joseph pointed a turkey leg at me. "Always an excuse. Your sister is right. We need to manage this for the family. You're too emotional with money." Emotional. I looked at the woman who was currently mentally spending millions she hadn't earned. I looked at the parents who were backing her up, ready to strip mine their eldest daughter to pave the road for their youngest. The antagonist wasn't just Natalia. It was the entire dynamic. It was a three-headed beast of envy, greed, and delusion. "You're right," I said, forcing a smile that felt like glass in my mouth. "I have been emotional, but I'm ready to be logical now." Natalia clapped her hands. "Good, I knew you'd come around, so do you have your routing number?" "Not on me," I lied. "And Natalia is right about the banks. If I try to move $5 million on a Thursday night from a mobile app, they'll freeze the account for fraud. It needs to be done properly." "Properly?" Maria narrowed her eyes. "Don't stall, Aria." "I'm not stalling," I said, leaning forward, lowering my voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "I'm talking about taxes, Mom. If I just give it to her, the IRS will take 40%. Do you want the government to take $2 million of Natalia's money?" The table went silent. The mention of the government taking their money was the only thing that could pause their greed. "No," Joseph grunted. "Hell no." "Exactly," I said. "So we need to do this the smart way. I have a lawyer, a wealth management specialist. We can meet him on Monday. He can set up a trust, a tax-free transfer vehicle. It will ensure Natalia gets everything she deserves. Natalia's eyes lit up. A trust, like a trust fund baby. Exactly like that, I said. You'll be set for life. She squealed and clapped her hands again. I love it. Monday, we do it Monday. I nodded, picking up my wine glass. I took a sip to hide the trembling of my lip. They thought I was capitulating. They thought I was rolling over. But what they didn't know was that my lawyer, Mr. Henderson, was the nastiest, most ruthless litigator in the state. And the trust I was planning to set up wasn't a bank account. It was a trap. A legal labyrinth designed to expose every lie, every theft, and every manipulation they had ever committed. Monday couldn't come soon enough. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the guest room of my parents' house, the room that was actually Natalia's overflow closet, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle. Downstairs, I could hear the murmur of the TV. My parents were still up, probably discussing which contractors to call for the renovations on a house they didn't own, paid for with money they didn't have. At 5:00 a.m., I slipped out the back door. Morning air was crisp, biting at my cheeks as I walked to my rental car. I didn't leave a note. They wouldn't worry. They would just assume I was out fetching bagels for the celebration breakfast. By 8:00 a.m., I was sitting in a leather chair that cost more than my father's truck, looking across a mahogany desk at Arthur Henderson. Arthur wasn't just a lawyer. He was a shark in a three-piece suit. I had retained him during the sale of my software company specifically because the opposing counsel, a massive tech conglomerate, was terrified of him. He had a reputation for finding the one loose thread in a contract and pulling it until the entire sweater unraveled. So, Arthur said, tenting his fingers and looking at me over the rim of his glasses. Let me clarify. You want to give your sister $5 million? No, I said, my voice steady. I want to offer her $5 million, but I want the conditions of that offer to be so legally dense, so intrusive, and so revealing that she hangs herself with her own greed before a single cent leaves my account. Arthur's lips curled into a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. It was a predator's smile. Go on. I told them we need to set up a trust to avoid taxes, I explained, leaning forward. They bought it. They're coming here on Monday at 10:00 a.m. I need you to draft a trust agreement that requires a full forensic financial audit of the beneficiary. I need clauses that mandate drug testing, criminal background checks, and a review of all existing liabilities to ensure fiscal responsibility. Standard due diligence for high-value asset transfers, Arthur nodded, taking notes. We can frame it as IRS compliance. If she refuses, she looks like she's hiding something. If she agrees, I interrupted, we find out what she's hiding, because Natalia is always hiding something. I can have the papers drawn up by this afternoon, Arthur said, but if you want real dirt, a background check might not be enough. You need eyes on the ground. He pressed a button on his intercom. Send in Marcus. A moment later, a man walked in who looked like he had been carved out of granite. He was wearing a nondescript windbreaker and jeans, holding a manila folder. Marcus was Arthur's go-to private investigator. Marcus, Arthur said, we have a rush job. The target is Natalia Rossi and her associates. Specifically a boyfriend. He looked at me. Chase, I supplied. I don't know his last name. He calls himself a life architect. Marcus snorted. I can find him. What are we looking for? Everything, I said, feeling a cold hardness settle in my chest. Debts, judgments, liens, criminal records. I want to know who she owes, how much she owes, and what she's been doing with her money for the last 10 years. And I want to know exactly who this Chase is. You think she's in trouble? Marcus asked. I think she's desperate, I replied. Last night, she didn't look happy about the money. She looked relieved, like a drowning woman who just found a life raft. I need to know what she's running from. I'll have a preliminary report by Monday morning, Marcus said, turning to leave. One more thing, I said, stopping him. Look into my parents' finances, too, Joseph and Maria Rossi. Arthur raised an eyebrow. Your parents? They claim they're broke, I said, staring at the floor. But Joseph has a union pension and Maria works part-time. The house should be paid off. I want to know where their money is going. As I left the office, stepping out into the blinding sunlight of the city, I felt a strange sensation. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't fear. It was power. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for the blow to land. I was the one aiming the hammer. The weekend was a blur of harassment. My phone buzzed incessantly. Natalia, can we do 6 million? Chase says 5 is a bit tight for the investment portfolio we're building. Mom, don't forget, Dad needs a new truck. Make sure the lawyer knows that comes out of the administrative fees or whatever. Dad, we're proud of you, Aria, finally doing the right thing. I didn't reply to any of them. I stayed at a hotel downtown, claiming I needed to be close to the lawyer's office to prepare the paperwork. In reality, I spent the weekend sitting by the window, watching the city below, and reading the updates Marcus was sending to my encrypted email. Each PDF attachment was a nail in their coffin. Monday morning arrived with a gray, drizzling sky. I met Arthur in the conference room at 9:30 a.m. The room was intimidating, glass walls, a view of the skyline, and a table long enough to land a plane on. You ready? Arthur asked. He looked immaculate in a navy suit. Yes, I said. Do you have the report? He slid a thick binder across the table. It's colorful. You were right about the desperation. I opened the binder. The first photo was of Chase, or rather, Charles Chaz me. Liller, I scanned the rap sheet. Fraud, embezzlement, Ponzi schemes targeting the elderly. I turned the page to Natalia's financials. My breath hitched. It was worse than I thought. Much worse. Showtime, Arthur whispered. The receptionist buzzed. The Rossi family is here. They walked in like they owned the building. Natalia was wearing a new designer dress that still had the creases from the box. My mother was wearing her Sunday best and a pearl necklace I had bought her for her 60th birthday. My father was in a suit that was 2 sizes too small, looking uncomfortable but smug. Wow, Natalia said, looking around the office. Nice place, a bit sterile but nice, so where do I sign? She pulled out a chair and sat down without waiting to be offered a seat. My parents flanked her, acting like bodyguards for the asset. Good morning, Arthur said, his voice smooth and dangerous. I'm Arthur Henderson. I represent Aria. Before we proceed with the transfer of assets, there are some regulatory hurdles we need to clear. Hurdles? Joseph frowned, sitting down heavily. Aria said this was a done deal, tax-free. It is, I said, speaking for the first time. I kept my hands folded on the table to hide the shaking. But to make it tax-free, the IRS requires us to vet the beneficiary. It's called the Gift of Equity Compliance Act. I made the name up. Arthur didn't blink. It's a formality, Arthur said, sliding 3 thick documents across the table. These are affidavits regarding your financial history. By signing, you are swearing under penalty of perjury that you have no undisclosed liabilities, no pending lawsuits, and no connection to illicit financial activities. Natalia grabbed a pen. Easy, where do I sign? Hold on, Arthur said, placing a hand on the paper. We ran a preliminary background check, standard procedure, and we found some discrepancies. Discrepancies? Natalia's smile faltered. What are you talking about? I have a few parking tickets, maybe. We're not talking about parking tickets, Ms. Rossi, Arthur said. He opened his own folder. We're talking about the $80,000 in credit card debt currently in collections. The room went silent. The air conditioning vent hummed loudly. That's a lie, Natalia said quickly, her face paling. That's identity theft. Someone stole my card. And the personal loan from fast cash lenders for $20,000. Arthur continued, reading from the sheet. Taken out 3 months ago, Interest rate of 40%. Mom, Dad, he's lying, Natalia shrieked, turning to them. Aria put him up to this. She's trying to embarrass me. My mother looked at me, her eyes narrowing. Aria, what is this? Why are you digging into your sister's privacy? She said she had some bills. That's why she needs the money. She has over $100,000 in high-interest debt, Mom, I said calmly. If I give her $5 million, the creditors will seize it immediately. Is that what you want? We can pay them off. Joseph slammed his hand on the table. So what? She owes some money. Who doesn't? Pay the debt, give her the rest. Stop playing games, Aria. It's not just the debt, I said, looking Natalia dead in the eye. It's Chase. Natalia flinched as if I'd slapped her. Leave Chase out of this. Who is Chase? Maria asked, looking confused. Her life coach. His name is Charles Miller, Arthur said, sliding the mugshot across the table to my parents. He is currently under investigation for wire fraud in 3 states. He targets women, convinces them to invest in his lifestyle brand, and then disappears with their savings. My father stared at the photo. This is the guy you brought to Christmas. He's a visionary, Natalia yelled, standing up. Tears were streaming down her face, but they were tears of rage, not sorrow. You don't understand him. He's going to change the world. We're building an empire. He's using you, Natalia, I said softly. He knows I have money. He sent you to get it, didn't he? Shut up, Natalia screamed. You're just jealous. You're a lonely, bitter spinster with a laptop, and I have love. I have a future. Give me my money. It's not your money, I said, my voice hardening, and you haven't seen the rest of the report yet. The outburst hung in the air, toxic and heavy. My parents were looking at the mugshot of Chase, then at Natalia, but their faces weren't showing the horror I expected. They were showing defensive stubbornness. They were searching for a way to make this my fault. Okay, Joseph said slowly, pushing the photo away. So the boyfriend is a bad apple. She can dump him. We'll make sure she dumps him. Aria, you can make it a condition of the trust. No boyfriend. Dad, I said, incredulous. He's a con artist. Natalia has been funneling money to him for months. Do you know where she got that money? She works odd jobs, Maria stammered. He dog sits. She hasn't worked a day in 2 years, I said. I signaled to Arthur. Arthur flipped the page in the binder. Mr. and Mrs. Rossi, are you aware that a home equity line of credit was taken out on your property 6 months ago? My father frowned. What? No, the house is paid off. We burned the mortgage note in '98. There is a lien on your home for $65,000, Arthur stated flatly. The paperwork was notarized digitally. The funds were dispersed to an account ending in 4490. My mother gasped, her hand flew to her mouth. That's my checking account. No, Mom, Natalia said, her voice dropping to a terrified whisper. She sat back down, shrinking into her chair. That was a mistake. The account ending in 4490 is a joint account, Arthur corrected. In the name of Maria Rossi and Natalia Rossi. I watched my parents. I watched the realization hit them like a physical blow. The inflation they complained about. The reason their retirement savings were dwindling faster than they expected. It wasn't the economy. It was the daughter sitting next to them. You took out a loan on our house? Joseph asked, his voice barely a whisper. He looked at Natalia, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. Natalia, tell me this man is lying. I had to, Natalia cried, the floodgates opening. Chase needed liquidity for the crypto launch. It was a guaranteed return. We were going to pay it back triple next month. Aria has $10 million. She can pay off the stupid loan. Who cares? You stole our house, Maria whispered, tears leaking from her eyes. We worked 40 years for that house. I did it for us, Natalia shrieked. I did it so we could be rich. Unlike Aria, who hoards it all. Why are you yelling at me? She's the one sitting there with millions while we're drowning. She's the villain here. Look at her, smiling. I wasn't smiling. I felt sick, but I also felt vindicated. She committed fraud, Dad, I said. She forged your signatures. If I give her this money, she won't pay off the house. She'll give it to Chase and he will vanish, and you will lose your home. She wouldn't, Maria sobbed, grabbing Natalia's hand. She's just confused. She's been manipulated by this man. Even now, even with the evidence on the table, they were making excuses for her. They were rewriting the narrative in real time to paint her as the victim. She forged your signatures, I repeated. That is a felony. We're not pressing charges, Joseph barked, turning his anger onto me. We handle this in the family. You pay off the loan, Aria. You pay off the credit cards. We get Natalia some help. We get rid of this boyfriend. That's the deal. I stared at him. The deal. You have 10 million, Joseph said, his voice rising, regaining its bullying cadence. This is pocket change for you. Fix this. Fix your sister's mess. That's what you do. You're the responsible one. And if I don't, I asked quietly. Then you're not my daughter, Joseph spat. You watch your sister drown, you watch us lose the house. Over money. If you walk out of here without fixing this, don't bother coming for Christmas. Don't bother coming for anything. My mother nodded, wiping her eyes. Family helps family, Aria. If you don't help us, then you clearly don't care about us. I looked at Arthur. He had stopped taking notes. He was watching me, waiting for my signal. They thought this was the ultimatum. They thought they had played their final trump card, emotional blackmail. They thought the threat of exile would make me open my checkbook. But they didn't know I had one more document in the binder, the nuclear option. I expected you to say that, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. I really hoped you wouldn't. I hoped that seeing her steal your retirement would be enough to wake you up. But it isn't. What are you talking about? Natalia sneered, sensing a shift. She wiped her nose on the back of her hand. Just write the check, Aria. There is no check, I said, but there is this. I reached into my bag and pulled out a sleek, black digital recorder. What is that? Natalia asked, her eyes darting nervously. 3 months ago, I said, when you came to stay with me for a week while your apartment was being fumigated. You left your iPad logged into your cloud account on my Wi-Fi. It auto-synced. So, Natalia challenged. So, I said, I have the voice memos you sent to Chase, the ones where you talk about Mom and Dad. I pressed play. Natalia's voice, clear and mocking, filled the silent boardroom. I'm at the dinosaur's house again. It smells like old soup and desperation. I swear, Chase, as soon as we get the money out of the house, I'm putting them in the cheapest nursing home I can find. Or maybe just leave them on the street. Who cares? They're useless. They've served their purpose. There was a pause on the recording, then Chase's voice. Juice. Tea keep them sweet, babe. We need the equity. Natalia's voice again. I know, I'm playing the dutiful daughter act. It's exhausting. Mom is so pathetic following me around. I just want to slap her. Once we get the cash, I'm changing my number. They'll never see me again. I stopped the recording. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the silence of a world ending. My mother's face was gray. She looked like she was having a stroke. She turned slowly to look at Natalia. The adoration was gone. The excuses were gone. All that was left was the hollow, crushing weight of truth. You, Maria whispered, her voice breaking into 1,000 pieces. You were going to put us on the street. The silence in the boardroom following the recording was heavy, a physical weight that pressed against our eardrums. For a moment, the only sound was the hum of the hard drive on the table and the ragged, wet breathing of my mother. You didn't mean that, Maria whispered, her voice sounding like it was coming from a great distance. She looked at Natalia with a desperate, pleading expression. She was begging for a lie. She wanted a lie so badly she would have believed anything. Tell me you didn't mean that, Natalia. Tell me it was a joke. Natalia looked around the room, her eyes darting like a trapped animal. She saw the stoic face of the lawyer, the grim expression of the private investigator, and the cold, unyielding wall of my father's back as he turned away from her. I was stressed. Natalia stammered, her voice rising in pitch. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. Chase says we have to visualize our future, and sometimes that means cutting ties with the past energy. It's just manifestation talk. I love you guys. Manifestation talk? Joseph turned back around. His face was no longer red with anger. It was pale, drained of blood and vitality. He looked 20 years older than he had 10 minutes ago. You called us dinosaurs. You said we smelled like old soup. You said you were going to put us on the street. I was just saying what he wanted to hear, Natalia screamed, pointing a trembling finger at the recorder. Chase is intense. You have to match his energy. It's his fault. He makes me say things. He's not here, I said, my voice cutting through her hysteria. But actually, that's not entirely true. I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window that looked down onto the bustling city street below. Marcus, I said, is he in position? The private investigator nodded, checking his phone. He's in the lobby. He's been texting your sister every 2 minutes asking if the check has cleared. He's here, Natalia gasped. She looked at her phone, which she had silenced. Oh God. We're going downstairs, I announced, picking up my purse. All of us. I'm not going down there, Natalia said, crossing her arms, though her lower lip was trembling violently. I'm staying right here until you write me a check. The meeting is over, Ms. Rossi, Arthur said, standing up and buttoning his jacket. And security is on its way up to escort you out. You can walk out with your family, or you can be dragged out by the guards. Your choice. The elevator ride down was suffocating. My mother wept silently into a tissue, her shoulders shaking. My father stared at the digital numbers counting down the floors, 20, 19, 18, as if they were counting down the remaining moments of his life as he knew it. Natalia stood in the corner, frantically typing on her phone, likely trying to warn Chase, but Marcus had activated a signal jammer in the elevator car. The doors slid open to the marble-floored lobby. It was busy, couriers running packages, business people checking in at the front desk, and security guards patrolling the perimeter. It was a very public stage. And there, pacing near the fountain in the center of the atrium, was Chase. He looked exactly like his mugshot, but cleaner. He was wearing a suit that was too shiny, his hair gelled back aggressively. He checked his watch, tapped his foot, and then looked up as we emerged from the elevator bank. His face lit up with a predatory grin when he saw Natalia. He didn't notice the devastation on my parents' faces. He only saw the dollar signs he thought were walking toward him. Babe, Chase called out, his voice booming across the lobby. A few people turned to look. He jogged over, arms wide. Did we do it? Is it done? Are we funded? Natalia froze. She looked at Chase, then back at our father. Well, Chase pressed, ignoring the rest of us entirely. He reached for Natalia's hand. Don't leave me hanging. The investors are waiting. Did you get the transfer? No, Joseph said. His voice was gravelly, low, and dangerous. Chase stopped. He looked at my father for the first time, his expression shifting from excitement to sneering condescension. Excuse me, I'm talking to my partner, Pops. Stay out of it. Pops, Joseph repeat. Ed, he stepped forward. My father was a retired dock worker. He had lost strength over the years, but in that moment, he seemed to swell with a terrifying, dormant power. You're the one who told my daughter to put us in a nursing home. Chase blinked, confused. He looked at Natalia. What did you tell them? They know, Chase, Natalia whispered, tears streaming down her face again. They know about the house. They heard the recording. Chase's face changed instantly. The charm evaporated, replaced by the cold, hard stare of a career criminal who realizes the con is blown. He took a step back, his eyes darting to the exit. I don't know what you're talking about, Chase said, holding up his hands. I barely know this girl. She's crazy. She's been stalking me. Stalking you? Natalia shrieked. The betrayal in her voice was piercing. Heads turned all across the lobby. Security guards began to move toward us. We live together. We have a dog. You told me you loved me this morning. You're delusional, Chase spat, adjusting his jacket. I'm a businessman. I tried to help you with some consulting, but you're clearly unstable. I'm leaving. He turned to walk away, but he found his path blocked by Marcus. You're not going anywhere, Charles, Marcus said, his voice calm and authoritative. Get out of my way, Chase snarled, trying to shove past the pie. Actually, I said, stepping forward, you might want to stay. The police are pulling up to the curb right now. Through the glass revolving doors, the flashing blue and red lights were visible. 2 uniformed officers and a detective in a plain suit were pushing through the entrance. Police, Chase panicked. He spun around, looking for a back exit, but Arthur had already signaled the building security to lock down the turnstiles. Mr. Miller, the detective called out, his voice echoing in the high-ceilinged lobby. Charles Miller. Chase bolted. He tried to jump the turnstile, but he slipped on the polished marble floor, crashing down in a heap of expensive soot and cheap cologne. The security guards were on him in a second, pinning him to the ground as the police rushed in. Get off me, Chase screamed, thrashing on the floor. I didn't do anything, she did it. It was her idea. She stole the parent's identity. I was just an advisor. The entire lobby was watching. Office workers held up their phones, recording the spectacle. Natalia stood frozen, watching the man she had destroyed her family for, the man she had stolen a house for, point a finger at her and scream that she was the criminal. The detective hauled Chase to his feet, cuffing his hands behind his back. He walked him past us. Chase looked at Natalia and spat on the floor near her feet. You useless cow, you couldn't even get the money right. As the police dragged him out, the silence returned to our little group, juxtaposed against the whispers of the crowd around us. Natalia turned to our mother, her face a mask of tragedy. She reached out a hand. Mom, he tricked me. I'm a victim too. You saw that. He tricked me. Maria looked at her daughter's outstretched hand. For 32 years, she had taken that hand. She had held it when Natalia scraped her knee. She had held it when Natalia cried over boys. She had held it when Natalia needed money. But this time, Maria stepped back. He didn't make you say those things about us, Maria said softly. He didn't make you steal the deed to our house. You did that, you. But Mom, Natalia sobbed, looking small and broken. I have nowhere to go. He's gone. The apartment is in his name. I have nothing. Maria looked at Joseph. My father took a deep breath, straightened his spine, and looked at his youngest daughter. You have nothing, Joseph said, his voice trembling but firm, because you tried to take everything. Don't come home, Natalia. The locks will be changed by tonight. Dad, Natalia screamed, dropping to her knees on the cold marble floor. You can't, I'm your daughter. I have one daughter, Joseph said, turning his head to look at me. His eyes were filled with shame, regret, and a profound sadness. And I have treated her terribly. He took my arm, his grip gentle. Let's go, Aria, please take us home. We walked out of the building, leaving Natalia kneeling on the floor of the lobby, surrounded by strangers, sobbing for a life she had thrown away with both hands. The drive back to the suburbs was quiet. It wasn't the angry silence of Thanksgiving, it was the mourning silence of a funeral. When we pulled into the driveway of the house that now had a $65,000 lien on it, my father didn't get out of the car immediately. He just sat there, staring at the peeling paint on the garage door. I'm sorry, he said. He didn't look at me. He couldn't. I know that doesn't fix it. I know it doesn't change the last 10 years, but I am sorry. I know, Dad, I said quietly. We almost low. Sent you, Maria whispered from the back seat. We were so busy trying to save her that we almost threw you away. You have to press charges, I said, keeping my voice neutral. To clear the debt on the house, you have to file a police report stating that Natalia forged your signatures. If you don't, the bank will hold you responsible for the loan. My mother started to cry again. It was the final test. To save their home, they had to legally condemn their favorite child. We will, Joseph said. He opened the car door. We will do whatever we have to do. The next few months were a blur of legal proceedings. I didn't give Natalia the $5 million, obviously, but I didn't leave my parents to drown either. I didn't give them cash. I wasn't going to make that mistake again. Instead, I used my resources. I hired a forensic accountant to trace the funds from the HELOC. Most of it was gone, spent on chases, lifestyle, but we recovered enough to make a dent. For the rest, I paid the bank directly to clear the lien on their house. I made it clear to my parents, this was a one-time bailout. It was not a gift, it was a purchase of their freedom. Chase, or Charles Miller, was denied bail. It turned out he had outstanding warrants in Florida and Texas. He's currently serving 8 years in a federal penitentiary. Natalia's fate was different. Because my parents cooperated with the investigation and pressed charges for the forgery, the debt on the house was declared fraudulent. Natalia was arrested. Since it was her first felony offense and she turned state's evidence against Chase, she avoided prison time. She got 5 years of probation and 2,000 hours of community service. But the real punishment wasn't the court's mandated litter cleanup. It was the exile. She lives in a studio apartment on the other side of the city now. She works 2 jobs, one as a waitress, one at a call center, to pay her restitution. She reached out to me once, about a month ago, a text message asking if I wanted to get coffee. I didn't reply. Last Sunday, I went to my parents' house for dinner. The dynamic had shifted permanently. The shrine to Natalia, the photos on the mantle, the trophies on the shelf, was gone. The house was quieter. We ate roast chicken. My mother didn't criticize my outfit. My father didn't ask me about my finances. We talked about the weather. We talked about a book I was reading. We talked about the garden. "This is good chicken, Mom," I said. "Thank you, honey," she smiled. It was a sad smile, one that didn't quite reach her eyes, but it was genuine. "I'm glad you're here." "I am too," I said. And I meant it. I had my money, I had my peace, I had my self-respect. It had cost me the illusion of a happy family to get here, but looking around the table at 2 people who were finally learning to see me for who I was, I realized that the truth, no matter how expensive, is the only thing worth paying for.